tell you what, why don't we try to muddle on without a poll right now? Good morning, everyone. This is David Pollack. I'm the chair of the Community Security Initiative, and I want to welcome you to our questions and answers special. This week, we decided to turn the floor over to you for the full hour and to try to address any questions that you might have. The first question always is, do you know anything about the grants? Well, I know a little bit more than we knew last time because miraculously, the United States of America has a budget. The budget was enacted yesterday, which means that the Department of Homeland Security and their budget-making arm, FEMA, their budget allocation arm, FEMA, has 60 days to publish what's called the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. And the NOFO, they have 60 days. FEMA says that they're going to try to get it out as quickly as possible, possibly in 45 days or under. But they're not masters of their own destiny. They, before they publish this NOFO, they have to get permission from other arms of government, from the White House, from the Office of Office of Management and Budget, and all kinds of things like that. So they're aiming at 45 days. Now, what does that mean? 45 days from now is basically the end of April, beginning of May. What does that mean to us in terms of how long we'll have to do the grant? We don't know. That's still a great unknown because they could try to give us a little bit more time. They would like to. There was a discussion at FEMA yesterday that we're not yet privy to, but they're working on it, and they have to be, and again, any decision they make has to be approved by the powers that be and the other agencies too. So it's really interesting. But what we always tell you is get started now. Make sure your pre-qualification is up to date. Make sure that your assessments are updated. Remember that, so if you had an assessment last year from CSI or another entity, and you received a grant, then you need at least a cover sheet to your assessment from last year that says, oh, well, we had vulnerabilities for, because of our doors, we now have a grant to replace our doors, and we're in process. So, you would have to take any changes into account. You also should take into account risk. And, if you get in touch with your regional security manager, will give you an updated threat assessment, what we consider the threat as of 2022. And also you should add any incidents that you may know about. If you had, there have been a lot of anti-Semitic phone calls and emails and social media posts going around. Any of those go right into your threat assessment, and you should update that. So that's an answer to several questions, or multiple answers to several questions. And now I want to turn it over to Dove.
Gotcha. Thank you, David. Good morning, everybody. Hello, Ilya. Let's get ready to rock and roll. For today, we decided to dedicate the whole time slot, our whole hour, to questions and answer. We think this is an integral part of what we do with these webinars. We want to give you that opportunity to ask the things that are still giving you issues you're concerned about, you want more information, maybe for some reason you couldn't get a clear answer from your rep, or it's outside of the actual grant administrative standpoint. So we wanted to put this session together so we can take that whole time, because it always takes a lot. Like David said, we started off with the next grant related questions. David will still be here throughout. Hopefully we're going to stay focused on administering the last grant, your procurement rules, and also the couple of hardware areas that we spoke about already. So before we do jump in, next slide, please. You guys know me, I do my little roll up, but we won't waste too much time here. You've all seen it. And also, bear with me, I love my puzzle background. It's the message we want to make. None of this stuff's in a vacuum, right? We got to think about how all the pieces and all the layers and all the considerations fit together, whether it's a plan, whether it's a bid, whether it's your actual installation of a project. But the most important thing, as always, we're a additional nonprofit resource here at Community Security Initiative. We don't speak for DHSES. We need to, always make sure to contact your rep when you have an official question or you need to get better guidance. All right. So next slide, please. And please spotlight Ilya as well. What we did was we presented some questions from FAQs. We saw on the survey we already did that actually many of you have reviewed the FAQ document. So that's great to hear. So you'll recognize a lot of these questions. But before we do, let's for today's session, this is just guidance. Ideally, we'd love to see your questions in the chat. Ilya and I will be reviewing them, and they're coming in. So maybe we don't even have to get to our queued up questions, and let's go with that. So Ilya, you want to get started with the first one?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us as always. And let's dive right into your questions in the chat. And I think, David, please, I think this one might go to you. Do we have any idea regarding the maximum amount, maximum amount available per facility this year?
We don't know for sure. We knew it was $150,000 last year, per site, up to 3 sites.
Well, that was the hate crimes grant, the 3 sites.
Right.
So I think for NSGP, right? So now what we're talking about is the federal nonprofit security grant program that should be opening late April that David was talking about. They're usually, if you have 2 buildings under the same, I guess, EIN or DUNS, you probably can only apply for 1 grant, I'm assuming. The hate crimes grant from New York State allowed you to apply for multiple buildings, even if it's 1 entity. NSGP, you have to be a little more careful.
And by the way, we don't know. Again, there is $250 million allocated this year in the budget. That's up $70 million. But the argument that we made in order to get it up to 250 was that there were so many organizations that did not receive grants. We needed more money. I doubted if they're going to up it from 150 because that's a very reasonable down payment on security, $150,000 per site, and Congress wants more organizations to become eligible and get grants.
10-4. Thank you, David. I hope that answered your question, Harold. All right, moving on, Ilya. You got an
okay. I'm reading them as they come, and I can only ask you to please state your questions as clearly as you can. Some of the terminology may not be familiar to everyone who's reading them, so just kind of make sure that your message gets across to everyone. Is anyone using M&A for reimbursement? I know it's limited to 5%. It's my understanding that we can't use current employees to administer grant and reimbursement, that we'd have to hire consultant, I guess, to claim M&A. Please advise if you have any experience with M&A.
Thank you. That's a good question. A lot of organizations do use M&A. mostly to help navigate the procurement.
Can I stop you for a second? What is M&A?
Good stop. Management and administration. There's an allowable expense within the NSGP grant, the Federal Nonprofit Security Grant Program. You're allowed to allocate up to 5% for this management and administration. Thank you, Ilya. Again, just like other categories of your grant, you have to have requested it in your investment justification. When you applied for the grant, you have to have requested it. Technically, you could do a modification if you are struggling enough and you need to allocate 5% and add that to your budget. But many locations do this. You can use an employee for M&A. The difference is, just like all the other categories, you have to have your bids. So if I'm working at Ilya's organization and I want to do his management and administration, I want to help him process bids, make an RFP, do the walkthroughs. I say, hey, Ilya, here's my document. I'd like for 5%, which, 5,000 of 100,000 grant, depending on your award. And I can say it to him, and he should ideally get 2 other bids. Same process, but it very much can be, but it cannot be used to retroactively pay that person's salary. So if they're like a full-time employee, you can't put that back into your coffers to pay for the amount of time they dedicated to this project. It's very specific. So I hope that answered your question, Virginia.
I just wanted to read directly from last year's FAQs. M&A costs include the following categories of activities. Bullet point: hiring a full-time or part-time staff or contractors / consultants responsible for activities relating to the management and administration of nonprofit security grant program funds. Bullet point: meeting related expenses directly related to M&A of NSGP funds. So if you want to cater the meeting, you can take it out of this fund, I guess.
Okay, as always, if any of this is still a bit confusing, don't forget to reach out to us after these or review these as they're recorded.
Okay, by the way, there's another one, a new question. Can an existing employee be utilized for planning or M&A? The answer is yes, but only for time worked above and beyond their normal work schedule. Otherwise, this might be considered supplanting.
Right.
Please also note that overtime and backfill are not allowable expenses. So I assume that what that means is the employee works their 35 or 40 hours. They can take a second gig, so to speak, doing M&A for the grant and get paid for it, but they can't get paid time and a half.
Right. Kind of like what I was explaining. Well, and I'm going to actually throw a curveball, not a curveball, but a comparison. Similarly, if you have budget for guards and you already have a guard and you want to have additional guards, you cannot use your grant funding to pay for the guards you already have. You need to go back to the bid process. It could hypothetically be the same company if they bid and go through the process fairly, but it could not be to pay for anything you have existing. It would be an extra shift or an extra personnel or something. Similarly to how we're talking about management and administration here, it's what they do above and beyond, like David just explained.
Okay, so let's jump to the next one. Procurement process. Do you need to bid out only individual budget items over 10K, or if the total of grant is over 10K? Do you need to bid everything?
Say it again. We are pleased to have forbidden for bids we cannot. I don't see that question. One more time, Ilya.
We're still at the very top of the list, Dot. That's why you're scrolling way down. Procurement process. Do you need to bid out only individual budget items over 10K, or if the total of grant is over 10K? Do you need to bid? Do you need to bid everything?
It's by project. So when you're reading your what they call Appendix 1A, your contract with the state, when they give you that breakdown, if it's 10,000, if it's 5,000, it's per project, meaning per your request with your investment justification. So 10,000 in cameras, 10,000 in doors, et cetera, each require that full process. So no matter what, by the way, even if it's less, till maybe like $500 is the only time you don't need the bid process. Let's clarify. The major difference becomes if the project is above or below 10,000 is whether you have to do an advertisement and sealed bids. You still always need 3 bids. Therefore, we just advise everyone, follow the process for all your, it's unlikely that all your projects are under 10K. So therefore, you're making an ad anyways. Include all the categories in this ad. Follow a sealed bid process. You need to receive 3 bids. Technically, there's places that it can say it can be a phone bid. Don't confuse yourself because we want to document it anyways. Just always get 3 written bids, and most likely you have to do the advertisement and sealed bid process additionally. So I would just stick with that. Don't confuse yourself.
2 points. Number one, let me just remind you, this is a perfect question to ask your program rep. Hi, we're doing this. Do I need to get the, do I have to advertise? Do I have to get bids on this? What do I have to do? And it's always good to ask Mother May I. Number two, Dov and I have been talking about the presentation that we're going to put out once the NOFO is released. And one of the recommendations that we're going to make is do not do 5 projects. Make sure that, people cannot manage, all those projects without a dedicated project manager. And by the way, M&A, the 5% for M&A is probably enough just to pay for doing the submissions, to jump through the hoops and create bids, and to evaluate the bids probably takes a lot more time. And we can help, but we can't do it for you. So we are recommending that you limit the number of projects you do, consolidate what you can do. For example, alarms and cameras and access control systems are all one project. You can do that with this, you can get a single bidder that can essentially do alarms, cameras, and access control.
Still need to have 3 separate bids, but you're saying that it makes your life easier if the winning bidder is capable of, it could be a legitimate criteria, does those 3 categories.
And it can be a criteria that someone has the capacity to do all 3. Because remember, you have to publish bid criteria. Right. You have to say how you're judging the bid, and you don't want to have to supervise multiple people.
So I think to reiterate David's point, now a lot of us, maybe everyone on this call, is in the weeds now. We're moving forward. Ilya and I are doing calls. Your RSMs are in the weeds with you. You're seeing what it takes to do this right and follow the rules and get a good security project. We're recognizing when we see a grant of $100,000 or $150,000 and we want to take a little bit of everything, sometimes that's its own too big a salad, right? And we need to keep it to a couple menu items. It's easier to navigate, and almost as important is costs are going up, supply chain issues. If we can be mindful on the front end of our applications going forward, so let's select a few legitimate categories that we can manage and not overwhelm us. When you have 8 projects in one grant, it's a lot because you have to talk to technically 8 different companies and 3 bids for each project. I think you guys are understanding that now. So David and I are realizing this is something we want to advise going forward. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. Are stone walls approved vehicle interdiction methods as an alternate to bollards? Do you want to jump in, Doc?
Well, you want to start with from a security perspective, and then I'll talk procurement perspective.
Oh, you threw it back to me now? Okay, there you have it. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, from a security perspective, no single barrier that is offered to you is a sufficient interdiction measure until you've received some assurances in the form of certified letters or test results or something that can definitively state that this particular solution is a certified vehicle interdiction measure. Even a stone wall, to be honest with you, can be built up to prevent a vehicle attack. Yes, possible. However, who has done the vector analysis? Who has done the impact analysis? Who has certified this particular manufacturing technique to build the stone wall to withstand a vehicle of a certain size, of a certain weight, going at a certain speed, crashing into this quote unquote barrier? Okay, so it gets a little bit more complicated. I can tell you one thing from a security perspective: if you're thinking of building that wall by yourselves with just a general contractor, you will have false sense of security, because there are certain means and methods to building a wall, a stone wall, or any other wall for that matter, that can withstand convincingly and certifiably a vehicle attack. So that's the security side. And let me pass it back to Dov for the procurement side.
Definitely, thank you, and that's super critical, because that's the whole point of these consultants' corner, that we want to make sure we do these programs right. From the procurement perspective, unfortunately, I'm going to have to say this is a great question for your rep, for your DHSES rep, because technically, in your EHP, you should have designed an NSGP, right, the federal grant. If you designed what you're doing, it just depends how stickler. If you said bollard here, bollard here, bollard here, are they going to come back to you and say, nope, you can only do bollards, that's what you were approved for? But if you said maybe a line, vehicle interdiction, vehicle protection, anti-ramming, and kind of kept it vague, you probably can use it. But this is definitely a question that you want to address with your rep, just because it depends on your EHP. It depends on what you actually requested in your IJ. So there's a couple of variables that I just don't have that knowledge of.
By the way, I just put into the chat a link to FEMA document 426, which I think is how to mitigate reference manual to mitigate potential terrorist attacks against buildings. And that really, a lot of what we say goes back to the rules that were laid out in 2003 and updated. But the rules are basically the same. Ilya said, focused on make sure that it's engineered to do the task that you gave it. There are lots of ways, people say fences. Well, there are fences that are engineered to do vehicle interdiction. Also, the question of, there are some things that you can do with landscaping that would not stop a truck traveling at 40 miles an hour, which is the, basic test, but would certainly deter someone from trying to do a ramming. So if you have a huge boulder sitting somewhere, someone would have to drive around the boulder. They would have to slow down. They might say, well, I can't get there by that path. But if you have, what are called Jersey barriers, which are the long, low barriers, those end up as, a truck going into a Jersey barrier turns that barrier into a battering ram, and would end up doing more damage than it would stop. So those are the kind of things don't try to do this on your own. Don't try to do this at home.
Absolutely, very good point. Again, I'm actually very glad that this is being recorded. Please go back and listen to the points that we're raising here, because we keep hearing the same kind of concerns that you want to add a solution, but you're doing this all by yourself or at the suggestion, let's say, of a vendor. And that becomes complicated because the vendor is not giving you enough guidance. And you probably don't know enough about these solutions to understand whether it's actually going to work or if it's going to be just add full sense of security to what you're doing. So let's move on to the next one. Hi, we placed our ads for bid amounts over $10,000. For one of the bids, we did not get a response. Do we need to post again in another paper? An SGP grant. Gotcha. Going back to Bob.
Great question. Well, let's start with this. You definitely still need 3 bids, right? So there's no way out of that. It doesn't have to necessarily be another paper, but hypothetically, you should post this again. You know, the DHSES reps will say, because we put deadlines on our, when we make the advertisement, right? All bids received by this date, right? That was the recommended language from DHSES. But we all know that we don't get a lot of responses online. That's why our team and the RSMs, we say, once you have an ad, share with us and we'll try to help distribute to ensure you get enough bids. That's why Ilya spoke about early on about researching and finding vendors that you could share your advertisement with once it's posted. But you technically, according to the rules, you should post it again. It doesn't have to necessarily be another paper, but at that point, I would definitely wrap in your RSM, make them aware, so they can help distribute it or coordinate with me, and we can help distribute it to make sure you are getting the bids you need. Another note, I've never seen it happen. Most locations, because they don't get their ads by the time they self-created when the bids were supposed to be received, I've never seen anyone penalized if the bids came after that date. But technically, the DHSES reps will tell you it should be received within that date. And if not, you need to make another advertisement.
Next one. I'm going to try to be as clear reading this as I can. And if I missed something or if we misunderstand it, I'll ask the writer to be more clear. Could a nonprofit training entity apply to train various agencies instead of each agency applying for training and contracting with the nonprofit training entity?
I think I
First of all, yeah. Dov, do you get it?
I think so.
Okay, cool.
Meaning if you're a nonprofit that does training, Virginia, you're on my screen, so I'm going to watch if you shake your head. If you're a nonprofit that provides training, can you apply to deliver that to the community? Unfortunately, I love the idea. Unfortunately, I don't think that's allowable under the grant because it's for that facility, right? You're applying, they're specific. They want the address of the facility. They want to know a lot of information about that facility. It's not to go out and distribute further. So my opinion, based on my experience here, is that wouldn't be eligible. You know, even when you do have a training award, they want to know, they want to see a roster. They want to see who attended. Not that they're doing it based on attendees, but they want to see that it was people from your organization, that it was worthwhile. It wasn't just 2 people. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't think you can do that. But I will make a comment based on the end of your question. It doesn't have to necessarily be a nonprofit training entity. You can use any training vendor. But right, we all know if you do training with a DHSES managed grant, you have to have prior approval on the training curriculum from the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, DHSES.
One idea, Virginia, that you can get the various entities that won grants in Rochester to kind of contribute, commit to contribute to a fund. And then, for example, pay Brighton Volunteer Ambulance to do Stop the Bleed and CPR training, to everyone. And then, have Mark do security awareness for everyone. But they would have to, the entities do it, then do a submission. do all of your your grantees have the same program manager?
She's muted. I guess a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The host would have to unmute her.
I can't
Right.
unmute.
Okay, so I got unmuted. So that's what I was thinking. Could the Jewish Federation apply, as you said, Mark, and then deliver it to Temple Sinai Temple to each individual location as the training? That's what my thought process was. And also, I'm gonna, when the FAQ, just to let everybody know on the call too, when the FAQs come out, if we don't really have a clear question or whatever, or answer here, we can always ask DHSES.
Right. We've tried to do group grants before, and they've never gotten anywhere.
But it would be one entity. It would be the Jewish Federation. You know what I mean? And then
I understand that we've applied in the name of an entity,
okay,
or to provide services for a community, and it's never gotten anywhere. Creative, but it's the idea is to go to the entity, since you have as opposed to us where we have to deal with 2,000.
Right.
I don't know how many you have, but probably 15 or 20 in Rochester.
All right. Well, no, definitely great question. Let's keep it rocking. I'm loving how this Q&A is going. So please keep it coming. Thank you, Virginia.
Okay, thank you. So there is a two-part question here from Laurel, and the first one, well, the second one was already addressed. What is M&A? We already talked about it. So what is an RFP package? RFP package is request for proposal. In one of our probably some of the first webinars we did, we answered that question. It's basically a combination of documents that you send to bidders for them to prepare their proposals. If you need more information on that, we'll be happy to give you more points. For each facility, it probably will be a bit different, but the typical things that we've talked about are RFP letter, EHP package, if you must have created one at least at some point, and you can update that. So that's a good format to use. Sometimes you need architectural floor plans with annotations to demonstrate kind of the bird's eye view of what the layout of your facility is, and so on and so forth. But we can walk you through this on an individual basis if you just contact the CSI. So there you have it.
I'll add real quick. Like Ilya said, we spoke about this in previous sessions a lot. Please review those recordings. Every one of these sessions, including this one, are recorded. That's an FAQ too. People always ask. These are recorded. I saw a lot on the survey. A lot of people have viewed them. You can skip over me and go right to Ilya's section as much as you need. But yeah, the RFP stuff was talked about, and it's really in short, so you can present to the vendors, to the installers, what it is you want from this project. Don't just have them come and dictate to you what this project should be. So there definitely is an in-depth way to do this so we can ensure it's done the best. And again, partner with your RSMs, watch the previous webinars and the documents we've provided. So thanks.
Okay, next one is, do you give hands-on training? I'm not sure if it's addressed to CSI, but let's suppose it is. Like in Texas, the rabbi knew just what to do to get everyone out safely. Must I speak to my rep, Bill Hayes, about this training? David or Dov?
It's a David question. We can throw Bill up there too, since he was called out if he's ready.
Yeah.
Or Seth, there you go.
So the answer is was answered in the chat, and I also posted all the regional security managers' contact information. So the answer is yes. If you're looking for certain types of training for your institutions, similar to possibly what the rabbi in Colleyville went, we're constantly doing now active assailant training. So please contact your regional security manager. If you don't know who the regional security manager is, your area is up in the chat, and I'll post it again for everybody's information.
Thanks.
And we're working through about 100 of the requests right now. So, and we brought on extra training staff to do this?
Training is an important piece of the security puzzle. And David and Mitch Silber and the whole team has really put together a program to enable these can be delivered to organizations in the New York City area. But I'll add, remember, training is an ongoing process. It's not a one and done. And there's evolutions, there's changes to threat environment, there's changes in your staff. So make sure you have a plan to continue it going. Obviously, there will be a capacity limit to what each RSM can do, but ideally your plan from your side should be to keep these going on a regular basis. Ilya, anything else to add too on that?
I'm also gonna add the email to request everything from assessments to training from CSI. I'm gonna put that email that'll bring you to, the link that'll bring you to the website where you could submit a request for services from CSI. And just so everybody knows, just to reiterate, everything we do is free.
Okay, I'll add one thing.
Not free. We don't charge for
it. Good point.
Okay. As it relates to training, there's one absolutely critical point that I think, and I'm sorry to say this, a lot of facilities miss. If you can't remember the content of the training 2 days after receiving it, the training is bad. I don't know how else I can articulate it more clearly. So check yourselves not while you're training. So it might be useful information to you. But as you leave that training, and let's say a couple of days go by, let's say a week goes by, go through your notes and see if you have built a little bit of muscle memory, mental, if you will, awareness that you can actually act these things out, right? So that's to Dov's point. If you're receiving training in a lecture format, right, and you never drill those capabilities, it is very unlikely that you'll be able to execute. Vice versa, if you're only undertaking practical exercises, which are useful, but you're not really looking at the fundamentals in a lecture format, that could also lead you in the wrong direction. So there's much to be said about quality of training, not volume of it, because there's volume across the United States. There's volume and volume of training and volume of those who provide it. But it's the quality of training. And I think that we continue to struggle to figure out, how do you assess the actual quality? What retention do you have in order to then act properly and in the optimal way in different situations? So I just want to leave that, even if it's all I do here is if it goes to recording, right? If you review this, let's say another month from now or 2 months from now, maybe that will be useful for someone, because in my many years of experience, I've sat through many training sessions. Okay, and
many, probably
too many. But the trouble is that an overwhelming majority of those sessions could have been improved in order to maximize not only retention of information, muscle memory, right, but also the ability to execute and act under duress. Because in situations that we're discussing, particularly active assailant, right, you're acting under duress. So you're not in a normal setting like now, right? Your cognitive ability will be impaired. So I've said it before, I just don't want to belabor the point because we have other questions to get to, but let's leave this as a recorded message, PSA, if you will, and please come back to it to review it for yourselves and carefully evaluate the training that you're about to buy or receive for free.
One other point, what I would, there's in training, when you do a scenario, you train for a scenario. Fire drill is a training for fire. Normally, when you do multiple trainings, you do drills, you do what are called injects. You throw a fly in the works. So, what's a good example? Well, you have a plain fire drill. everyone knows. They get, the kids all know because they do this 6 times a year. They get up at their desks, they form a line, they go out, they go to the front door, they go to the playground, and they stand. What happens if the door that they go to is blocked? Because that could happen in a fire. That's an inject. So the idea of, doing drills that kind of make people think and get out of what Bill talks about and we talk about in our training, out of our lizard brain into our human brain, is something that's really important, is that we know what our options are, we know what the menu is, and we then make, we know without a lot of thinking what our options are, and we can orient ourselves and then act. Ilya and I can talk about OODA loops all day long. I'm also posting the, just a recording of what we, our online training for everyone, so that you can kind of, if you didn't attend one of our online sessions, and we had literally thousands of people on our online sessions, you can watch it.
Okay, just a reminder for us all that we're already at 11:45. So look at how we're kind of going through all the questions, and we're very grateful that you've taken the time to fill up our chat rather than us using some reminders for ourselves. So that's great. Thank you for doing that. Let's move on and try to cover as many as we can now. Can the M&A be a congregant on the executive committee or of a temple?
It sounds like we were talking about earlier, that this is allowable, because it actually, the guidance refers to using even employees who are paid, except like we said earlier in this session, they got to put a bid, give you their bid, and it should be paid externally to anything that you pay them for currently. So if there's someone on the exec committee, probably not a paid personnel, but if they're, but definitely eligible for M&A, but must follow the procurement process.
And document. Make sure they have invoices, and all of those kinds of things.
Does our local police department need to do the assessment, or can someone else be used?
That's a great question. If you're not, and I think Seth jumped in on this response, one of the big things that your regional security manager, if you're in New York City or the surrounding counties, does is what we call a terrorism vulnerability assessment. The whole team is trained on these and does them on site at your location, and they're geared very specifically to the grants that New York State administers, both the federal nonprofit security grant program and the state hate crimes grant. Many local police departments do assessments as well. That is legitimate to use. Often not as comprehensive and not as designed for these grants. But if you are interested, it might be a little, our team has numerous requests for assessments, and to get them back to you in time, because they are a comprehensive product, we have to be realistic when we're still accepting requests. So I don't know the timeline there, but similarly, reach out to your RSM. If you don't know your regional security manager, the email, the CSI requests that Seth has put in the chat can get you in the right direction.
Okay. On Shabbat, our congregant CSS helpers stand at the entrance driveway checking cars to see who's arriving. They are out there in all weather. They want to know if building a guard shack would be an approved expense.
Unfortunately not. We've tried, we've requested as of maybe a couple, things always change, right? We know the grants change, but so far we have seen that this is not an allowable expense for a guard booth, a guard shack, especially a separate structure under the grant, especially if you already have your IJ submitted, I don't know what category it would go under and how you would retrofit it back now. But one thing to always recognize about these grants is they don't allow construction. They don't allow new construction. It's all for retrofits, replacements, hardening, or installation. They're very clear. We often recommend a man trap, right? The double door setup, forced entry resistant, gives you that layering in case someone tailgates or follows through. But sometimes you might get a little pushback, and if you need to really create a new construction to this versus a retrofit of an existing vestibule. So applying that to a guard booth, I don't see how it would be eligible, but best source, ask your DHSCS rep.
Next one, I think, Dov, is to the point you were making earlier about the value, the project value for that requires advertising. So are you saying that if something is valued at $500, is advertisement still necessary?
I don't remember the limits of the contract of what Appendix A1, I believe they call it, right? They break it down, 10,000, 5,000. It's such a minuscule amount that precludes you from bids that it's unlikely you requested anything in your IJ, in your investment justification, for $250 or $500. I just don't see it. I've never seen that happen. So that being said, you would still go through that procurement process. You always need 3 bids. It's such a small chance where you could bypass that. I don't see it likely. And just to keep our lives simple, I would stick with the advertisement, sealed bid process, get everything in writing. It's just better for you in the long run anyways. And for a good security project, getting multiple bids, hearing from multiple people gives you insight. Oh, they could do this. Oh, okay, let's see what the other vendors can do. Let's see what the other options are. It's just a good way to approach any program, especially from a cost perspective, from hardware, what their actual products are, and their service. So I wouldn't be looking for ways to bypass this. It's really not so difficult, but definitely work with your RSM, reach out to us, and we'll help you navigate it because it is new to a lot of you.
Next one is, we have concerns regarding completing an SGP fiscal year 19 projects by August 2022 due to supply chain other issues. We may want to apply for an extension. Our state rep said FEMA must make a blanket decision for all, not on an individual basis. Do you have experience with this? Could advocacy be done with legislators, FEMA, on this?
It's a great question. The FEMA extensions are blanket, meaning, and I'm glad that your rep Faye was direct with you, because sometimes they just say we need to apply for an extension. It's probably based on a lot of factors whether they'll approve that extension, but I don't know if one was done for fiscal year 19, August 22.
There have been numerous extensions,
but I don't know about
for the nonprofit security grant program. The most important thing is do as much as you can. Document. In other words, do the, let's say it's a supply chain issue. So you can clearly show that you've given bids. You've done the bidding process. You've done the advertising. You've done the bid selection process, and then your selected vendor cannot get back to you and say, "I can't get camera." They're saying, "I can't get cameras in time." So then you put what we urge everyone to do is to talk to their program rep. They will be guiding you. First of all, if there's one problem with supply chain, DHSCS is unlikely to ask for the blanket approval. If there are, several dozen supply chain questions, DHS is very likely to ask for an extension. So this is something that usually doesn't happen with with political intervention. You can try. I don't know if, it wouldn't hurt But essentially the idea is to work with your program manager, document that you've gone as far as you can, and due to conditions outside your control, you can't complete the project. You have a very strong argument. And DHSES has responded. Every time that there's a cluster, and when I talk to Eric Abramson, who's the director of grants, he'll say, look we're seeing a lot of them. We're going to ask FEMA.
Okay, next question is what are bollards? So open Google Maps, go to Street View, and go to the corner of 42nd Street and First Avenue. You will find a UN campus, right on the street. There are metal pipes that are sticking out of the ground. Those are bollards. And so bollard is a sometimes shallow, sometimes filled metal pipe that's sticking out of the ground. It is circular in diameter, and it's a pipe that's sticking out of the ground. That's basically the name for the bollard is the name for that type of a vehicle barrier. Unfortunately, the word bollard is used to describe a variety of barriers for vehicle interdiction that don't match with that name. Bollard is only used for metal pipes sticking out of the ground. If you're using a bench that is still rated as a vehicle barrier, you wouldn't call it a bollard. If you're using a wedge that's sticking, from the ground and it's electrified and it goes up and down, right? That is also not a bollard. That's a vehicle barrier. Thank you very much, Seth, for sharing this. These are bollards. Okay, they sometimes can be rectangular. Very often, specifically, they are metal pipes. Okay, so they could be filled with concrete. It really depends on the mode of installation and how they achieve the vehicle interdiction rating or engineered design that helps protect from vehicle attacks. So that's that.
If I can add real quick, and I know
Sure.
we're coming up on time, believe it or not, that we've talked about a couple topics from hardware perspective and system perspective so far, right? We talked about door hardening, windows, right? Window film and window security. We talked access control. We have a lot of topics to go, including vehicle interdiction that would include bollards and other ramming devices to help you design and install an effective system. But it's a few weeks out. Pay attention to the invites as they come out. Maybe we can shift it up in an order perhaps, but it's definitely one of our upcoming topics.
Okay, next one is, we were told that CPR and Stop the Bleed training was not allowable under NSGP. Can this be clarified?
That's probably true. There's a lot of trainings out there. You get first aid for animals or something that it's not a blanket for all trainings. It really should be specific to security response, lockdown procedures, active shooter, active threat. So that you should have language like that when you applied in your investment justification. And that's, again, another reason why DHSES wants to see your training curriculum to make sure it's not off the bat or some wild trainer out there. We saw those when this grant first started, people being trained in all kinds of stuff. So DHSES wants it on topic. That doesn't mean those aren't important trainings. It doesn't mean you shouldn't include them in your curriculum, but unfortunately not something that you can pay for with your grant. But I believe CSI does a few of those trainings in-house for organizations in New York.
Okay, next one. If an exercise is created and we want to include local first responders to make it realistic, can we reimburse the police, et cetera, for overtime, backfill? You said we couldn't with M&A. And if we can contract with them, wouldn't it be a sole source, one local police department, et cetera? Please advise.
Virginia, that's a complex question. If you want to, even if it's sole source, I haven't seen first responders and law enforcement be paid back with grants. if you have a training budget, so I guess the question is, if you have a training budget, can some of that be used for sole source long? I mean, look, sole source, you still have to go back to your rep and get that approved anyways before. So I couldn't answer you here. But I don't know if that's even an eligible thing. It's a big DHSES question.
So purely a procurement thing. I'm not going to speak for DHSES, but procurement thing, right? You can specify in your training scope that these specific experts be included on the team to train. Okay, so that they would be reimbursed by the contractor that is bidding on the work. So I actually, if it were up to me, if I were running a project, I wouldn't even worry about inviting people separately and then having to pay them. Just run it through, have them do the 1099s through the organization that you're hiring. Okay, they will take care of paying and reimbursing if it's allowable. Okay, again, to many points where we I guess are related to this, but on the procurement side, I think you got to make sure that it's an allowable expense first and foremost. But as far as getting the right experts, you just specify what you want and let the training organization that's bidding on the job provide it.
Let me just jump in right now. We always advise when you're doing individual active threat training to include the local law enforcement. So that means in New York City, we would have the local community affairs, the local neighborhood officers, the local CO, the someone from the borough counterterrorism people kind of attend. What you want is for someone to be on site so that they know your site, they know what you expect to do, they can anticipate what you're doing if, God forbid, they're called to a scene, and they can tell you what's going to happen. So that, a standard part of our presentation is, this is what's going to happen when the cops show up. Well, we like the cops to say, this is what happens when we show up. And that's the most effective training. So, and we've, in Nassau and Suffolk County, you can work through Nassau and Suffolk PDs, and Lerone can help you. In Westchester, Bill can help you, and your RSM and any other in New York City can help you set up something with your local cops. I can't speak for Monroe County.
Thanks, David. Very useful. Are gates on driveway an approved expense?
Yes, if it's in your EHP, and if not, you might need to do a modification. Also within your IJ, it is a definitely.
The point is, Dov, anything, gates, fences, fences include gates.
Or vehicle systems too.
And vehicle systems include gates. They are only approved if it's in your assessment as a vulnerability. If it's not in your assessment as a vulnerability, you can't bring it in, retroactively.
That's a good point. Another reason, we had a question earlier about who can do assessments. That's why you want to make sure you have a comprehensive one. Law enforcement ones may be very criminal prevention focused, maybe have other intentions. But for these grants, we really want to focus on that kind of wide arching terrorist or hate crime type of attack. And that we know, and why David brought that up, is we know, and many of you have seen, that the reps at DHSES are much more stickler. If you ask for something that wasn't in your assessment, they will catch that and they will say you cannot apply for that. So if it wasn't, just make sure, before you submit, if you use another source for your assessment, make sure it covers all the categories that you think you're going to want to include, or you're going to be hamstrung later.
Again, it's going to be something that we put into the coming recommendations. People have gone back to, people who didn't receive grants, or even people who did, get notified, hi, you asked for X, and X isn't in your assessment. So you cannot get X. And FEMA started enforcing that 2 years ago.
Big time.
So
Yeah.
it's got to be there.
Last question.
All right. Well, code, I suppose it's a reference to the grant codes. So there is a code for wall. Okay. And the statement is, we use bollards / protective planters as the description. Can we request that this be changed to other kinds of vehicle interdiction? So I know that changes are allowed, even if you've been approved to do something else or under this code, but that coordination needs to happen with your grant administrator. You need to state to them and have very clear justification as to why you're changing things. But has this happened before? Of course it did. It's just a matter of coordinating and justifying your needs.
Right.
And it's relatively easy to do any change within a category, within the AEL code.
Right. And
it's really difficult to jump from one AEL code to another.
Or especially an AEL code, authorized equipment list code, AEL code. If you didn't originally even have that code, but something that already exists, you're definitely in a better spot. But this is something, especially for vehicle protection, for bollards, being that they're so expensive, I wouldn't want to find that out on the back end. Ask your rep on the front end, hey, we originally put our EHP for bollards, but we want to use a different system. We just want to make sure that's okay. Get it in writing, good to go. Let's not find out on the back end.
And I see that there's a comment more than a question to everyone. For anyone who wants to train in Nassau County, you can reach out to the local precinct POP office to arrange with NCPD Homeland Security to set it up. Let me go back to many statements I made before. I repeat the statement over and over, okay? And I think Dov mentioned it earlier. The frequency of training is what's more important than having the training itself, okay? Of course, you can go and arrange training with most police departments and Red Cross for that matter, because they train for free, and multiple other organizations that will deliver pertinent training. But if you only have that training once a year, that's false sense of security, okay, for the most part, right? So I can only incentivize you to think about how to maximize the impact of training so that muscle memory is built. To David's point, ability to understand what your actions should be without having to think about it too much, okay? That state will definitely help you get out of trouble in more situations than if you were to just receive training once and never have built enough awareness about your actions when you're under duress. Okay, because if I were to train, and I've done training for executives, I've done training for groups of people in your facilities and so on. For executives, very easy. They come to a conference room and expect comfort and have coffee and pastry, and they sit down and they're about to do a crisis exercise, and I turn off the lights. Everybody's like, well, what are you doing? What's going on? I'm like, yeah, and you can't have access to pastry. And by the way, 3 of you are gone. You're not available. That is a scramble, okay? And when you take people out of their comfort zones, right, and you still ask them to make decisions, you will see the difference, okay? So please think about both the frequency of training, the quality of training, and also how that training helps you build awareness and decision-making under duress.
And let's not.
By the way, I just put a link, a YouTube link in the.
Thanks, David.
You know what I'm talking. You know this one from The Office.
I think so. I think so.
It's terrific for training. Everyone should watch this because whatever you think, things will change. Don't go overboard, like I did once when I thought that I would. We were doing I was in a school doing fire drill kind of evacuation, and I brought dry ice. So I made the primary exit smoky, and the kids went crazy. So that's going too far, but you have to do this and keep it up.
I want to also add that comment in our chat was for Nassau County. Please do not forget, we have an amazing regional security manager out there who does trainings, Lerone Philliby, if you have not met him yet. So definitely reach out to utilize your sources at JCRC Community Security Initiative.
And he works daily with the Nassau and Suffolk Police. And they rely on him for training.
That's a great point too, by the way. Many of the local police departments in New York City, Westchester, Long Island are referring local organizations to do trainings with CSI. Again, it's going to come down to capacity that we can support. It should be that partnership with local law enforcement, but you have a great resource here with your RSMs.
Yeah. Even NYPD is referring active threat training to us. Of course, we did hire their active threat chief active threat trainer retired, so we hired her. We have a great team here, and and we work regularly with PD.
There's also a point for everyone to remember. Don't forget that CSI doesn't only do training. CSI also lives and breathes the normal operations of your facilities when they do assessments. They know which doors are broken. They know how circulation in your facility is maybe not optimal. They know the heat maps of circulation within your buildings and how difficult it might be to evacuate a nursery, for example. Okay, so they can relate not only to just formality of training and building content and saying, yeah, run, hide, fight, right? They will definitely scale this up to a different level because they understand majority of your facilities. Okay, and so that training likely will be a lot more memorable and certainly more realistic, if you will. So, but we always welcome more questions and any requests, obviously with the caveat that the bandwidth is never ideal. So I think we are now at the end of our Q&A. We'll probably do more of these, and we're very grateful that so many of you dedicated an hour of your time. And if more questions arise, please reach out to us. I think throughout this, we've been sharing the contact information for everyone. So, and there's that general email inbox that we monitor carefully. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Ilya.